Hi, I'm Roger Aguinaldo, and welcome to the M&A Advisor podcast. Since 1998, the M&A Advisor has been the definitive source dedicated to recognizing achievement, delivering unrivaled thought leadership, and connecting the world's mergers and acquisitions elite. We help you sharpen your edge and accelerate your success in deal making. Whether you're an ambitious new player or a market veteran, this podcast provides masterclass strategies, unvarnished stories, and vital lessons from the industry's influential figures. Before we launch into this episode, be sure to follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and subscribe to our essential M&A Alerts email newsletter. Find all the links below. Your engagement fuels the deal-making community. Now let's get into the transaction.
Okay, terrific. Good morning. So, Van, I just wanted to give you an update. Give us an update. I just want to give you a little bit of background on Van. The only thing you need to know is that he was recognized in 2022 for the M&A Advisor Leadership Award, and you were inducted into the M&A Advisor Hall of Fame. That's all you need to know, okay? Okay, terrific. And then for a long time you were at Skadden, and now you are at Dentons. Maybe you want to sort of give your transition over there, Van, and then we'll get right into the energy, into the energy sector and what opportunities are there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Roger. And thanks for the turnout. It's appreciated. I've been doing this 33 years now. Started my career in Baltimore, found my way up the road to Wilmington at Skadden. Skadden asked me to come out to the West Coast to run our practice there and around the Pacific Rim. I've known Tanya, who leads our group, for over 20 years and really just liked the platform that Dentons had to offer on a cross-border, international basis. So it's been a lot of fun. And the deal we're getting honored for this evening is a deal that touched. It was perfect in terms of our capabilities because it touched Spain, Australia, the UK, Netherlands, China, and Canada, not to mention the US. So just to jump right in, So what's ironic now, war is always good for distressed business. Well, I hate to say, but when Trump took office, he immediately reversed quite a bit of our historical green energy policies and initiatives. And if you do the math, there was just even by like October of last year, there were already over $24 billion of green energy deals that were canceled. And that was sort of directly tied to Trump, the White House, I should say, turning off green energy capital raising incentives, but also releasing a lot of restrictions on fossil fuel, et cetera. Now, ironically, what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz has now kind of flipped the script a little bit, but there's no way that the White House is going to concede that they got it wrong and we're going to be back to green energy. People might decide on their own, right? Capital providers might decide that on their own, but I think everybody's kind of holding their breath as to what this, I forget which of the 5 days we're in right now of Trump pressing pause while Israel and Tehran continue to bomb the heck out of each other.
Just on that, on the clean energy, but that a lot of that is more earlier stage investment, isn't it? Or is that it's not really mature middle market, upper middle market kind of investment, whereas some of the sort of oil sector, I mean, those are extremely mature businesses. So you're pretty much a different life cycle of the business and different investors.
Different life cycle, I would agree with that, Roger. The one nuance I would underscore is that the beginnings of green energy deals historically have involved taxed equity credits. And so you see a lot of blue chip companies. In addition to the case that we did last year, Powen, another similar company, Pinegate, also filed bankruptcy, and they owned and managed green energy plants. Powen supplied battery energy storage systems to green energy plants. The acronym is BESS. And you need a battery at a solar plant because the sun isn't out 24/7, right? But you need energy 24/7. So the battery component is essential, and Powen controlled 20% of the supply and servicing market worldwide. And so the tax equity investors just went away, and Pinegate ultimately collapsed of its own weight. It was a much larger company, billions of dollars versus hundreds of millions of dollars in the case of Powen. And these are like large insurance companies, Geico, Progressive, blue chip companies like Walmart. They have all this cash. They got to put it to work somehow, not just like selling, underwear and groceries. So they reinvest it in strategic investments that make sense. The profile of a tax equity credit deal in energy is you can get 5x on your money within the first 5 years just from the tax equity credit. It doesn't actually have to make money. So blue chip companies consider it a low risk, high reward investment. So they were doing it all over the place because everybody was like green energy, and the White House just literally turned off the lights on that.
So it's mostly a lot of these blue chip companies with sitting on a lot of cash. They want to sort of get these tax credits or tax losses kind of built into that. Those are mostly the investors that are in these deals?
Yeah, exactly. So the way that these partnerships work typically, or they're LLCs, is that the tax equity investor, the Walmart in this example, will get the first 5 years of tax credit, and they'll control the entity. And then once that tax recapture period has lapsed, they've got already 5x their money, then the partnership flips back, and now it's in control of that managing member, the arranger, if you will, the Pinegate entity that sat on top of their Chapter 11, and then they get the actual return on investment of the plant itself over the life cycle of the plant. But the tax equity investor got the money into the ground right away, got a quick return. So it's a win-win unless somebody changes the rules.
And so what year or kind of we are at that? So assuming this is so on the Walmart, were they able to go through their sort of first 4 or 5 years of that tax, or was that their first year that they were kind of?
It was still early stage inside the recapture period, and so that's why. So a lot of these entities are bankruptcy remote. Footnote, query whether there's such a thing anymore. But it required the Walmart to consent to a filing. So in the case of Pinegate, you had sort of the corporate enterprise that sat above each of these individual projects. The individual projects themselves didn't file bankruptcy. So when Pinegate sold its assets to a handful of investors in its 363 sale a couple of months ago, late winter, early spring, they actually had to enter into a negotiation because Pinegate had given parent guarantees to the structure. The parent guarantee had become worthless. So new buyer had to sort of put some skin in the game to make the Walmarts of the world and my clients, we represented literally half a dozen across the system. In that case, they had to get us comfortable that they had, a sufficient investment in the success of the project.
Yeah, so this is interesting, these tax credits. It's an alternative investment, I would presume. That's where you would categorize that. Are there funds that are out there that are creating all of these? And then the Walmarts, this is through their balance sheet, right? Not through their pensions or any of the long-term capital that they have through their balance sheets, right?
Yeah, it's not fair. It's sort of lazy to call it, a wealth office or a family office. But yeah, I mean, any company, and you see this with Amazon too, right? Amazon has sort of side funds that invest particularly in emerging technologies, AI. I forget the name of the blue ship that Amazon's invested in terms of spacecraft, but it's
Blue Origin, right?
Blue
Origin.
There you go.
I'm an AI is right up here.
But yeah, so just to get into some of the mechanics of this, and I think what I'm about to talk about is we got exposed to a lot of routine sort of muscle memory challenges in any Chapter 11 case, but because the rules were literally changed overnight, I think you're going to see in the energy space these kinds of things will repeat themselves. So the first problem we encountered in Powen was a real credibility lapse. The working capital necessary to source battery systems in China, tweak them in Vietnam and Mexico, and then deliver them to a site in Australia, in Detroit, it takes a lot of time and a lot of working capital. And with the rules of the game changing literally overnight as a result of an election, and Trump.
This was, come on, this was not really a surprise, if you will. Even there was a more than 45% chance, 50% chance that he may become president, Trump 2.0. We were starting to see a lot of these climate funds in Europe, just imploding, right? So, sort of if you have the betting markets, right? It wasn't necessarily quote unquote overnight. Now the rules changed overnight.
He did not let any grass grow under his feet.
Right.
No.
But the market, should have seen some of this or handicapped some of it. No.
That's probably fair. But as a consequence, so one of the deals that Powen was working on days before the filing was the largest solar plant in the world in Australia. It's called Acacia. And we had a real credibility problem. We couldn't deliver on our milestones. We had kept asking for additional funding from customers before our involvement. And we're basically just giving away stuff on the back end. So they would say, look, we know we haven't hit milestone X or Y, but if you advance us the $3 million that are tied to those milestones, we'll give you a year's worth of free servicing when the project is up and running. So like borrowing from the future to pay the past. And real credibility gaps occurred. We got in front of people, got in front of our largest vendor live, brought in from Korea, got in front of the Acacia folks, Brookfield owned. They came in from Australia to New York for a series of meetings. We were working through a deal that we thought was going to give us a bridge to something that made sense. And then Acacia just was like, these guys don't know which end is up. So they terminated their deal pre-petition. Detroit terminated their project pre-petition. So we were left without anything. And then, so like I said, one of these lessons, takeaways, is credibility. And so when you're in a credibility deficit, what do you do? And so what we advised and what the CRO agreed with our board manager was to get in front of, get into a filing, get protection, get in front of these people, be completely transparent. And we went directly to the customers and said, look, 20% of the world's activity in this area depends on us. You need us to exist, and we need funding to exist. So let's figure out a way that makes sense. We got over 100 participants in a summit that we did in Dallas because it was kind of central. These places, these customers were kind of scattered all over the U.S. So we picked Dallas because it was kind of central. We offered people the opportunity to participate remotely. We had a buyer that was interested, and we just got everybody in a room and had probably like 3 dozen people live and then another 80 people, on Zoom. And by the end of the 3 days of this summit, and we had said, look, we might have to convert the case.
These were all investors? These were customers.
So,
okay.
Owners of power plants.
Okay, owners of power plants that are gathered together. You got close to 400 of them all either 300 in person. Wow.
Well, no, 3 dozen.
3 dozen. Okay, 3 dozen in person.
And so the end of that week, we actually had a funding proposal, and we actually improved it. One of the challenges that customers had expressed was free riders. Like one of the systems that Powen had in place was called a remote operating center. And this allowed us to identify risks, challenges, downtime of batteries across Powen's entire portfolio, based on the internet and cloud-based. But some customers were like, well, what if I pay for my charge, but my buddy down the street doesn't pay? You have this free rider problem. So what we proposed to try and close the gap was say, look, if you fund, you will get DIP financing privileges, right? This will not just be you paying an invoice, it'll actually be a DIP loan. And then if the house of cards falls in, you will get first recoveries relative to the so-called free riders. And that really appealed. Now, the other interesting thing that happened in the case is that on the heels of this, we actually had two entities that were interested in buying the assets of Powen that appeared at the end of that week where we had this customer proposal. And then they actually competed against each other up until like an hour before our emergency DIP hearing on who was going to provide the DIP financing. We ended up, and this is unheard of, in a free fall case, we ended up with DIP financing that was under 10%. It was actually 8%, and I don't, if there was a fee, it might have been 1%. But it was like, I hadn't seen a DIP loan with a single-digit percentage in a long, long time.
Well, you kind of created the market, right? And getting everybody together, that was important, right? Getting people in a room together.
Yeah. And people have strong views, I would say, about venue. And I don't want to steer off too much on a tangent, but one thing I want to emphasize, in a free fall case, and as I said, in the energy sector, I think you're going to see more free fall type cases.
For the uninitiated, free fall
free fall means I'm out of money, I've got no plan in sight, I've got no financing, I just need protection so that I can figure out which end is up. As opposed to a pre-negotiated case where you have a deal with a critical mass of creditors, or a prepackaged case where you've actually solicited votes before you're filing and you can confirm a plan. So this is bad. So one of the things that we really thought was very important from the perspective of a free fall case is access. We knew we were going to have emergencies, and we wanted to be in a jurisdiction that was sophisticated, but also was very willing, almost from like a customer service perspective, to give us quick, urgent access. And we also had gotten feedback from the customer base that they didn't want to be saddled. This goes back to the credibility point. They didn't want to be saddled with the sins of the past, like Powen's legacy problems. So we created a new entity focused on customer management, customer financing, customer rights. And we formed it in New Jersey because it was a very small bench, but very proactive, very sophisticated, very willing to accommodate emergency requests and be available on short notice. And it ended up being hugely successful. And at the end of the case, actually, and we put this in our application, Judge Kaplan actually said that it was a model case. We actually emerged from bankruptcy 1 day under 6 months from filing, which is pretty remarkable, I would say, for a free fall case.
Well, it's a great case study, and then also a lesson learned is you got to get the people who count on the service, right? You got all the customers who have downstream businesses that rely on this, and so let's get them all in a room. I guess you didn't have too many lenders because this was funded by the tax credits, right? So I guess the Walmarts of the world were less interested, but they were going to lose that anyway, right?
Yeah, we did. We had one legacy secured creditor. They had agreed to an accordion up to $200 million, but it was tied to, it was an asset-based facility. So it was tied to inventory and raw materials moving. And so we didn't have enough availability when we started to actually take advantage of that.
And you needed the customer contracts and agreements, and they kind of were, if you will, next in line. Did they have deposits also in all?
There were some escrows that were pretty tied up. We couldn't access those, but it was the lender gave us a little bit of rope, but not much. We actually had to come up with independent financing. And then, so, we did a sale that closed about 10 weeks into the case, paid off the DIP financing, paid off the pre-petition secured debt, and then emerged with a plan to create a trust to go pursue non-liquid assets that remain. One of the other big lessons here, and again, I think it's really important for energy and free falls in general, is recognizing the things you can do and the things that you can't do, and just not trying to do too much. And it's obviously we would want to have a case that provided more of a recovery for unsecured creditors and customers than we did, but I think it was important. I think we ended up saving money and maximizing value by recognizing the things we couldn't reach too far for.
Yeah, well, so this is a great case study. Any lessons or takeaways on the energy industry in general, be it clean energy or sort of traditional or legacy energy sectors that you think are going to be opportunities for turnaround and distressed?
Yeah, I mean, there's a tug of war going on. There is an exponentially large pressure on our energy infrastructure, created in large part by AI and the ever importance of data centers and access to instant data and information. Juxtapose that against what has occurred in the past year under this administration is it's revealed that our energy infrastructure is very fragile. And now with the war in Iran, you see how fragile the world's energy infrastructure is, right? In the good old days, it was poor form, it was impolite, it was not done. You wouldn't blow up infrastructure, right? It's happening. Like the largest liquefied natural gas plant on the planet is now facing a 5-year repair job. That's going to have a huge impact on everybody in this room, on everybody in this state, country, hemisphere. People don't appreciate how really precious energy is. We take for granted, right, when we plug in our phone at the airport, or we flick on the
I
lights,
was about 20, I don't know when it was, about 15 years ago. You guys remind me, I was stuck in Cleveland, Ohio when the whole Northeast grid came down. When was that? You ever come out
2004. August.
2004, yeah. So I was stuck in I was stuck in, okay, sorry for those of you from Ohio. I was stuck in Cleveland, Ohio for a day and a half, and everything was down, right? The whole Northeast grid. Did we fix that?
Well, I'm not sure we know, right? I think that Cleveland blames Canada and Canada blames Cleveland. But it's funny. We filed a case that weekend because the lights went out. It was a Friday, and we went to our lender and said, "Look, but for the lights going out in Manhattan, we were in Manhattan. We're ready to refinance this debt. Just give us till Monday. We presumed the lights would come back on by Monday, and in fact they did. And the lender told us to go jump in a lake, and so we filed the case in the dark. We hit an ATM, like somebody had to drive to New Jersey to get an ATM with enough cash. And for a year after that,
wasn't New Jersey down too? I don't know.
We got far enough away. We ended up in front of Judge Liflin in SDNY, and every hearing began the same way. Judge, remember, this is the case where the lender made us file during the blackout. And you go, oh, that case.
Well, that's great. So listen, Van, I'm not as attractive as your partner from Dentons. Did she arrive? Is she here? No, I guess she's still working on that case. Okay, but look forward to great things ahead for you at Dentons and any opportunities there are. Please give a hand for Van Durer, please. We're going to take a break right now where we could do some connecting. We went back to back to back to back with our sessions, and then we'll be back here for lunch at noon. We're going to have, and you were part of this a few years ago with Jack Butler, our chair of the Hall of Fame. We're going to have our Lifetime and Leadership Award recipients. For those of you who want to know, how do you lead in this industry? How do you at least get to the Lifetime? You'll be there. Many more years for you, Van. You got to fix these companies, okay? Again, give a hand for Van, and we'll see you at noon.
We hope today's episode delivered actionable intelligence. We want to hear from the field. Share your questions or insights, leave a message on your favorite platform, or email us at editor@maadvisor.com. To secure your steady feed of premium M&A content, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and subscribe to our M&A Alerts email newsletter. Find the links in the description below or visit us directly at our website at www.maadvisor.com. I'm Roger Aguinaldo, founder and CEO of the M&A Advisor. Thank you for being part of the M&A Advisor community. Until next time, stay decisive, stay connected, and happy dealing.